Ukraine's $60,000 drone swarm destroys $1.3 billion Kremlin defenses. In the early hours of the morning, as Moscow believed itself untouchable behind layers of billion-dollar air defenses, Ukraine launched an operation that rewrote the rules of modern warfare. What began as 6 low-cost drones hidden inside a rusty shipping container became a direct strike on the Kremlin's most secure administrative complex, right as Vladimir Putin slept inside its walls. While Putin sleeps, Russian radars were blinded, elite defenses were overwhelmed, and the symbolic heart of Moscow was left burning. This was not just a strike, it was a message. And the full story of how it happened is even more shocking. Today at 3 a.m., Moscow time, the Russian capital remained quiet beneath a layer of freezing mist drifting across the Moskva River. Inside the Kremlin residence, President Vladimir Putin was reportedly asleep, unaware that a Ukrainian drone operation costing around $60,000 was about to challenge more than $1.2 billion in Russian air defense assets. The Russian leadership believed that the newly drafted peace deal, one aimed at forcing Ukraine to surrender Crimea and abandon any future NATO path, would finally end Kiev's resistance. But the night was about to demonstrate that political declarations do not stop physics, nor do signatures neutralize the will to strike back. Hours earlier, Russia had launched a major bombardment on Kyiv, deploying 600 Shahed-type loitering drones and 30 surface-to-surface missiles, a strike estimated at more than $40 million. The attack hit residential sections around Kiev's central district, and again struck the Okhmadit Children's Hospital, prompting immediate condemnation. Ukrainian intelligence assessed that Moscow believed overwhelming numbers would force Kyiv into submission. Instead, the attack became the trigger for a counter-operation meticulously prepared, strategically calculated, and carried out at a fraction of the cost. By 3:02 a.m., a rusty commercial shipping container parked beside the frozen river concealed the beginning of Ukraine's response. The box had been stationary for a week, blending into a row of snow-covered trucks and industrial machinery. Inside was a compact launch system for 6 AQ-400 Scythe drones, low-cost autonomous strike platforms each carrying over 150 pounds of high explosive, priced at roughly $10,000 per unit. For a total of $60,000, Ukraine was about to challenge the heart of the Kremlin's defensive shield. The drones activated simultaneously, their onboard computers powering up after a week of intermittent wake cycles during hibernation. This standby period allowed the software to cache the environment via pre-staged imagery and brief wake scans of Moscow, bridges, rooftops, lampposts, road curvature, creating a local optical map that did not rely on GPS. This was essential because Moscow's center was saturated with jamming fields designed to blind satellite links. Ukraine's engineers intentionally chose autonomy over remote guidance, relying on terrain recognition rather than radio communication. This allowed the drones to move as independent observers rather than externally piloted assets. The container roof opened with a sharp pneumatic release, and the 6 drones launched in tight formation. Their design emphasized minimal radar reflection, mostly composite materials, a narrow frontal profile, and a low engine signature. They dropped instantly towards the river, stabilizing 40 feet above the icy surface, flying at approximately 124 miles per hour. Rather than climb or expose themselves, they used the Moskva River as a low corridor. The towering architecture around them, bridges, hotels, administrative buildings, acted as a radar shield, forming an urban canyon that masked them from long-range Russian radars, calibrated for high-altitude threats. By 3:03 a.m., the drones maneuvered beneath the Bolshoi Moskvoretsky Bridge, narrowly avoiding a delivery truck crossing overhead. Their formation corrected automatically, guided by optical cues rather than GPS. This allowed them to navigate despite heavy radio interference across Moscow's central district. Their internal batteries, augmented by solar recharging during their week-long dormancy, provided enough endurance for a short, high-intensity strike run. The operation had been built around efficiency, minimal cost, maximum penetration, and total exploitation of Russia's defensive assumptions. On top of the Kremlin walls, Russian guards on duty scanned the southern horizon, expecting threats only from Ukrainian territory hundreds of miles away. Their detection posture reflected Russia's belief that no attack inside Moscow could begin without triggering border surveillance systems. That assumption cost them dearly. The guards were unaware that a strike group of Ukrainian drones was already within a mile of their perimeter. At 3:04 a.m., the first Russian system to react was the Pantsir-S1 battery stationed on the Kremlin roof, an asset valued at $15 million and designed to intercept cruise missiles and helicopters. Its radar spun up, detecting what it believed were anomalies, but the system misinterpreted the drone's signatures due to their proximity to the ground and building interference. The battery discharged a burst from its dual 30mm cannons, hitting a streetlight and damaging civilian vehicles instead of engaging the incoming threat. The weapon was optimized for fast-moving aerial targets at altitude, not small, low-altitude drones weaving between rooftops. Meanwhile, the S-400 Triumph system positioned nearby, Russia's flagship integrated defense valued at over $700 million for a full battery, attempted to track the drones using its Big Bird radar. Yet the system's radar horizon limitation prevented it from detecting targets flying beneath the line of sight, created by buildings and terrain. To the S-400, the incoming drones were lost in the electromagnetic noise of urban clutter. The radar algorithms filtered them out as irrelevant. At 3:05 a.m., the Ukrainian swarm initiated a decoy maneuver. One drone, Alpha, briefly flashed a thermal signature, triggering a sudden response from Pantsir operators. They launched tracer fire, believing they had engaged a valid target. The drones responded by splitting formation and projecting synthetic electronic noise that generated hundreds of false signatures across Russian screens. For a system built on 1990 S-era processing hardware, this overwhelmed its fire control logic. Inside the Kremlin command center, operators struggled to differentiate real threats from artifacts. What appeared to be hundreds of approaching targets were, in reality, only 6 drones. For a fleet costing about $60,000, Ukraine had momentarily blinded systems worth over $1 billion combined. By 3:08 a.m., the Russian command escalated to emergency protocols, activating the Krasuka-4 electronic warfare complex, an asset capable of jamming airborne radar platforms over a radius of more than 180 miles. The system attempted to fry the communication link to the drones, but this had a limited effect. The Ukrainian drones shifted into laser-based intercommunication mode. Operating in tight formation, the drones used short-range directional beams to communicate, bypassing radio entirely. The EW barrage caused one drone to lose orientation and crash, reducing the swarm to 5, but the overall mission profile remained intact. Observing the battlefield conditions from a secure underground node in Kyiv, Ukrainian controllers monitored telemetry until it was jammed. Once blind, responsibility transferred entirely to the drone's onboard AI, which had been preloaded with the target's coordinates and 3 possible approach vectors. Despite the loss of the Delta drone, the remaining platforms continued. By 3:09 a.m., another drone, Alpha, initiated a sacrificial decoy maneuver. It ascended towards the Pantsir system, but detonated 50 feet above the launch vehicle, dispersing a dense chaff cloud composed of aluminized fiberglass fibers. This instantly blinded the Pantsir's radar, creating a 30-second window where the system could not interpret any incoming object. For a weapon priced at $15 million, it was effectively neutralized by a drone costing less than $12,000. In the Kremlin, panic escalated. Operators regained partial EO/IR track. A 57 E6 interceptor destroyed Bravo at a distance of 500 yards. Yet the launch cycle exposed the Pantsir's reload vulnerability. While the crew attempted to rearm, the remaining 3 drones scattered and approached the Senate Palace dome from multiple angles. By the time the Kremlin's internal command realized the drones were originating from within Moscow rather than Ukraine, the inbound strike time was reduced to under 15 seconds. Their calculations for longer-range engagement were irrelevant. The threat had already bypassed every layer of their detection lattice. At 3:10 a.m., the 3 surviving AQ-400 drones began their final attack sequence. Flying low over the rooftops of the Kremlin complex, they forced the Pantsir cannons into near-vertical depression angles. The system sprayed fire across Red Square, damaging state structures in a chaotic display of friendly fire. The drones executed a coordinated starburst pattern around St. Basil's Cathedral, maintaining altitude low enough to remain beneath the effective radar lock of any Russian system. The Senate Palace Dome, housing key administrative planning offices and intended as the signing site for Russia's proposed 2025 peace agreement, became the primary target. The reinforced dome, sections approaching approximately 20 foot, was designed to resist external blasts. But the Ukrainian warheads were built for delayed detonation, relying on kinetic penetration before explosive release. At full speed, all 4 drones struck the dome almost simultaneously. Their reinforced nose assemblies allowed them to puncture the dome before detonation. Once inside, the magnetic fuses triggered, unleashing 308 pounds of high-grade explosives, equivalent to over a ton of TNT concentrated within an enclosed chamber of the Senate Hall. The internal overpressure event that followed reached nearly 5,000 psi. Enough to deform load-bearing structures. Windows within a 100-foot radius were shattered instantly. Heat surged to approximately 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, incinerating documents, furniture, and interior fixtures. The immediate structural damage was estimated at over $200 million, with some analysts suggesting that the total loss, including damaged systems and compromised defensive assets, could exceed $1.3 billion. As dawn approached at 6 a.m., thick smoke poured from the damaged dome. Drone footage circulating online showed a fractured structure, with nearly 40% of the dome compromised. Russian officials attempted to downplay the strike, but the geopolitical impact was immediate. Politically, the proposed peace deal's optics were gutted. Western analysts noted that Ukraine had demonstrated the capability to strike at the symbolic heart of Russian power with minimal expenditure. The message from Kyiv was clear. High-cost Russian defenses were vulnerable to low-cost adaptive systems, and Ukraine retained both the will and capability to retaliate despite pressure to capitulate. The key question now is, after this strike, how will Russia adjust its defensive posture, and what countermeasures will define the next phase of the conflict?